How's it going, everyone? I am with a dear friend, Timothy Paulson. We're going to have a conversation about something he recently taught me, a story about his father and a principle that he describes, which has a lot of really beautiful implications in my mind. And so just to give a little introduction to Timothy, and I'll let him kind of provide a little bit more of a perspective, and then I'm going to let him actually share his screen. He's going to go through a few slides, share a little story about his dad, which is profound. And then we're going to just riff back and forth on it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then that's going to be it. So Timothy is an author. He wrote the book Totality X. And Timothy, he also has a master's degree in divinity, and he's working on his PhD in ministry. And he really focuses on the combination of spirituality and art and faith for transformation, right? Timothy, how about you give us a little bit more background on that? And then feel free to just jump into your story.
Okay, so the merging of art and theology, that's what I love because I was raised by a full-time artist. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm an artist. So in my book, Totality X, the art of becoming all God created you to be, I'll actually hold it up there. The total eclipse represents becoming everything you're capable of becoming. But it's chapters. Here's a piece of art. Here's success principles. And then we go from there. So I love doing that. Ben, it's a delight to be with you. I love your work. I've listened to your recent book, The Gap in the Game, 5 times. I started it for the 6th time. So I love you, and I love being with you, and I love sharing. So thank you.
Absolutely. So just for a slight context, Timothy was the basically MC of the recent Genius Network annual event. And he shared this concept, go straight to the master, and told this story. And I was so in love with it that I wanted to have him share it right here. And then we'll just go back and forth on it. So go ahead, Timothy.
Thank you. So, Joe Polish, Genius Network, that's where we met. So we always thank Joe for that. Go to the master. So I'm going to tell this story. My dad, now everybody out there, you are watching this interview, this discussion between Ben and me. And I say, my dad is the artist you've seen on TV. Now think about that for a second. As you've gone through the channels over the years, since 1989, my dad's been the one where you stop and you watch. He's painting a little bit. You're kind of intrigued. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is he the one with the big hair? No, that's Bob Ross. My dad is Buck Paulson. So you may have seen him. His show is called Painting with Paulson. Now, my dad has been a master artist for a lot of years. He's a remarkable artist, but he didn't start out that way. Here I am. I'm 3 years old painting with my dad. When I'm a little boy, I was raised with a paintbrush in my hand. He started painting the same year I was born. But he was a professional baseball player. He was a complete jock. He was as far away from being an artist as you can imagine. And I'm not exaggerating. He played baseball, football, basketball in school. He signed his first professional baseball contract at the age of 17. So here he is with the Fargo Moorhead Twins. When he was 17 years old, there he is. He actually roommated briefly on the way to spring training with Roger Maris. Roger Maris hit more home runs in a single season than Babe Ruth. He hit 61, most home runs ever. He was with the Yankees without steroids. There's been a couple surpassing him with steroids, but my dad was roommates with him one spring training. So my dad's a full-time professional, baseball player. He plays for a couple of other minor league teams. He went into the Army, served for a while, came out, graduated with a degree in physical education. And then he gets his dream job, marries my mom, who's from Santa Barbara, California, and he gets his dream job right here in Santa Barbara, California. Now, picture this. My dad's a complete jock, loves sports, and he gets a job as recreation department supervisor. He was in charge of all of the adult and youth sport programs in Santa Barbara. His dream job. The second week that he was in Santa Barbara, started his new job. It was March of 1962. My dad's walking down the street and he sees an artist. This isn't the artist, but he sees an artist who's set up. He's got his easel and he's painting away. And my dad stops and observes. The next day, same thing. The next day, the same thing. And then he goes home to my mom and he calls my mom Tweet. That's short for sweetheart. He says, Tweet. Now picture this again. He's got 3 young kids. He's just started a new job. And my dad says, Tweet, I want to become an artist. I want to be an artist. Now, my dad took one class, art class, throughout his entire life. It was in junior high, and he got a D grade in that class. He'd never done it before. My mom says, okay, I'll get you an art set for your birthday in August. Well, it's March. My dad says, I'm not waiting. So my dad went, got an art set. He got a paper towel, put it at his kitchen table, and he painted. He calls it his first attempt. It's right here. There's a copy of the first attempt. So that's a tree. My sister later, probably 8 years old, asked him, Daddy, how old were you when you painted this? He asked her, how old do you think I was? 3? So my dad was 28 years old. But you know what? This first attempt, at least he was in the game, right? It's like, okay, I'm moving forward. I want to be an artist. So then he started adult education classes. And my dad's, again, a jock baseball player. So he says, okay, I'm going to create a piece of sports art. So my dad created this after lessons at adult education. And you look at that and you say, okay, that's kind of nice, right? Imagine him saying to my mom, tweet, I want to be a full-time artist. Look at the work that I'm doing. She probably was a little nervous. So my dad went back into the art store and he was talking to a person there named Kitty West. And my dad said, I'm going to adult education and I'm taking classes there. And Kitty said something that completely changed his life. She said, if you want to learn to paint, don't waste your time over there with the amateurs. Don't waste your time over there. She said, if you want to learn to be a great artist, go to the master. Now, what did she mean by that? There was a master artist who moved to Santa Barbara a year or two before named Claude Buck. This is a self-portrait of Claude Buck. Claude Buck was a child prodigy in art. I could tell you all about him, but you could Google him. Great artist, once recognized as one of the 100 greatest living American artists. It's all he ever did was paint. The schools that he went to were art schools. He taught at the Art Institute of Chicago. He was a brilliant artist. But he moved to Santa Barbara in his later years, in his 70s. And Kitty West said to my dad, I don't know if he is giving lessons or not, but if you want to be a great artist, go to the master. So my dad got the address, drove right over to 512 North Milpas Street in Santa Barbara, knocked on the door, was told Claude's around back painting in the backyard. My dad went there. Now, this isn't a picture of the first meeting, but this introduces on the left. Our left is Claude Buck in his 70s and my dad at the age of 28 or so. Okay. So my dad goes to Claude Buck and he says, Claude, I've never painted before. I mean, a little bit, at adult education. I don't know how to paint, but I would like to become a great artist. And Claude and my dad spoke for a while. And then Claude said 15 words, these 15 words. The master is saying to this young man, here it is. Let's see if we can make a great artist out of you in a year. Now, wait a second. Think about this. My dad only took one class in school. He got a D, just playing around at adult education. My dad was not asked for his resume. He didn't ask Claude didn't ask him, what did you study in college? Claude didn't say, let me see samples of your work. What Claude saw, what the master saw was a burning desire in my father. It's like, this is what I want. And Claude saw, and Claude knew that with that burning desire and the things that a master can give, Claude had created great artists before. He knew he could do it because he was a master. So my dad started taking lessons with him. And I want to show you again. So this is before Claude Buck. This is sports art before Claude Buck. All right. After taking lessons from Claude Buck for a period of time, the very first painting my dad ever did without Claude helping a little bit with strokes. Okay. So every other painting before that my dad did, Claude Buck would come over and he would add strokes to make it better. That's what masters do. They help, right? But the very first painting my dad did without any help from Claude Buck, I'm going to show you now. And I want you to look at the contrast. Here is before going to the master. This is after going to the master. And I want to go back here, before and after. And this painting is, I think it's about 28 inches wide, 40 inches tall. It is a beautiful masterpiece. So how in the world did this happen? So my dad, since that time, he's been on, this is a cover of a magazine, 1986. He's like the king of the high seas. He paints these beautiful seascapes. Here he is. He's done series of arts and books. So here's another one of his paintings. So my dad cut his learning curve by decades. Ben, had he stayed at adult education for the next 20 years, he would still have been working at the recreation department with this dream of someday becoming a master artist. My dad, and I was talking to my dad about this just 2 days ago, he said, you know, at the end of Claude's life, near the end of Claude's life, my dad said, I said to Claude, how can I ever thank you? How can I ever thank you? I mean, I'd become a full-time professional artist. Claude, how can I ever thank you? And Claude responded, every time you paint a great painting, you thank me. And my dad has been painting great paintings ever since. But my dad, when I was talking to him about this 2 days ago, he said, you know what, though? When I help someone else paint a great painting, I'm thanking Claude Buck. So my dad has become the master that thousands of people have come to over the years in workshops and on television and so forth. So that, Ben, is the beginning of the story of going.
That's beautiful. So now I have a few questions for you about
lay them on
story.
me, man.
So, and just for the viewer and also for you and me, we have about 10 minutes. There's a few questions I have about the story, but the main reason this story stuck out to me, and then I want to kind of dig deeper into this. One is, so in psychology, there's a concept called pathways thinking. It's a fundamental aspect of motivation and hope. So hope and motivation are very similar concepts in psychology. They're actually slightly distinct, but they both have very similar components. One is, in order to have hope and motivation, you have to have a goal, whatever that goal is. In the case of your father, what would you say his goal? His goal was he wanted to be an artist, but would you say
a great artist? Yeah.
Would you say he wanted to be an artist that he could not only want to be a great artist, but he wanted to provide for his family through his art? Like, was he clear on his goal? Like when he first presented it to your mom, he wanted to be a professional artist, right?
He wanted to be a professional artist. That was his goal. Yeah.
So that was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in order to have hope and motivation, you need generally three things. One, you need a goal, whatever that is, some specific goal. In the case of your dad, he wanted to be a professional artist. Then you need a pathway. So this takes us to pathways thinking. You need some mechanism, pathway, process from getting from A to B. You know, from his standpoint, his initial pathway was going to community college classes, right? Or adult education, however you describe it. That was the pathway he was initially on. And then the third aspect of these is you've got to have some form of confidence or agency that you can actually to walk the path or find a better path. And a big aspect of hope is what, pathways thinking is finding new and better pathways to where you want to go. So when you said he went straight from community college to straight to the master, obviously that's a fundamentally different pathway to the goal, a much more effective pathway. My first question is about Kitty West. So he was at an art store?
Yes.
So he was at an art store, and what the heck was going on? He was just buying more art and he was talking about his goal. What was going on there?
Yeah. So as I recall, Kitty West worked at the store. And
so this was just a regular art store in California?
Just a regular art store in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And so he's in the art store buying some art, talking about, and he gets in a conversation with Kitty West. And she, I think she sees his passion as one. My dad's a passionate guy. You don't become a full-time baseball player or a professional baseball player just by, you have to have that pathway, right? To become a professional baseball player. My dad directed it towards, okay, now I want to be an artist. So she sensed that. And she didn't know much about Claude Buck other than he had moved to town and she knew of his reputation. So that's what it was. It was like it's kind of random in a sense.
Well, but I would say he probably was talking about his goal of becoming a professional artist.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was expressing and vocalizing what he was trying to do. He wasn't hiding it. It seemed like he was very vocal. I want to be a professional artist. And so this is what I'm doing. I'm going to go to adult education classes. Obviously his passion and his, he was a good human being and people were drawn to him and he's a lovely soul, but I'm guessing he was talking about his goal and his ambitions, right? Yes, wouldn't you say?
I would say that's absolutely correct. Because otherwise there would be no reason for her to say, if you want to become a great artist, go to the master. If you want to just, it's a hobby, continue going to adult education, right? Why to go to the master if it's not something like that, like a big goal is what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, my guess is he was very explicit with Kitty West that like, I'm really wanting to become a professional artist. I want to provide for my family. And obviously he was genuine. He was like, I want to do this well. I love art. Yeah. This is what I see myself doing. It seemed like, and this is just my gut, I'm just listening. I'm just, I'm actually really just asking you, but it seemed like he was very committed to figuring out how to get there. And maybe, obviously this conversation pointed him towards a more unique pathway, a direct and more effective pathway. Yeah. But the only reason I think he was even open to hearing it was because he was super committed to that goal and he was talking to people about it. And so when someone's like, go straight to the master, he was like, it wasn't just like a theoretical idea. It's like, I'm going to go do that. Like, this is a new pathway. I didn't know about Claude Buck maybe. And so I'm going to just go to this guy and find him. It kind of reminds me of the quote, when the why is strong enough, you'll find the how.
Yes.
And usually that how is actually a who, going back to who, not how. Like usually it is a who, but that whole idea that when the why is strong enough, you'll find the how is the idea of pathways thinking. You'll find a path to where you want to go if you're very committed to it. And it seems like your father was insanely committed to that goal. He was not ashamed of it. He was sharing it with people and people could feel that. Yep. And so Kitty West was like, look, this guy's serious. Like you should try to go to the master. And he was so in tune with it or excited about it. He went to it. I'm just wondering your take on all this.
Well, so let me illuminate that a little bit because you bring up some really good points. So my mom tells this story kind of in the early stages before Claude Buck. She tells a story about how she went with my dad to the art store one day and she felt sorry for him because there were other artists in there who knew what they were doing. They knew the brushes to get, they knew this and that, the other thing. And she said, poor Don, it's like he's overmatched, but he's got this desire. So I'm going to support him in this desire and in this goal. When Kitty West said to my dad, so here's the rest of the story. Here's his phone number. Here's his address. Now,
so she had his phone number and his address.
He had his phone number and his address. And so I don't know if he's giving lessons, but I know that this is his phone number and his address, probably selling paintings or something. Now, what could my dad have done? One, gone home and eventually reached out to Claude Buck. He could have gone home and called him. My dad immediately, it wasn't the next day, it wasn't an hour later. He left the store and drove to 512 North Milpas Street. So that's reflective of, this is what I want. This is my goal. It's not a passing fancy, like you're saying. He was talking about it. So that's why Kitty West knew about it, right? If you want to become a great artist, she didn't say, if you want to learn to paint, go to the master. If you want to become a great artist, that's what my dad reflected in the conversation. That's his goal, go to the master. And then my dad, it was $5 a lesson. This was 1962. So that might have, I don't know what that is comparable to now, $45, $50, something like that.
How much?
My dad started going over and taking lessons from Claude Buck. And Claude said, after a short time, pay me for one lesson a week, because that's what my dad was doing. But you can come over anytime you want and paint with me during the week. My dad was over there all the time during lunch and at the kitchen table at night and Saturdays. I mean, I was his favorite model because I was willing to sit, so he would paint me. And I've got like this one here. So I'm sitting down and I've got a big shirt on that he gave me so I don't get, so I'm painting and he painted me, right? So that was kind of in the early days. But my dad, he expressed it. That's right, Ben. He expressed it. I want to become a great artist. I want to be a full-time artist, meaning I don't want another job. This is a job I want, to be an artist, make a living as an artist. And everything about his actions were consistent with that goal. That's probably, as I think about this, everything he did was consistent with achieving that goal.
Yeah, it reminds me of the phrase, will it make the boat go faster? If
Yes.
it's, thinking about your father from working with the master to where he's at now, I'm interested in another reflection on pathways thinking, finding his way to getting his stuff on TV, finding his way to getting his art sold and commissioned and being able to make a living. Like, it seems like because he was really clear on his goal, he was committed to it, he was in love with his process, he was in love with his stuff, he kept, continually educating himself on new ways to succeed in his craft. It just seems like he was continuously finding new and better ways to succeed and finding his ways into great opportunities.
People were drawn to him because of his passion, because of the clarity of his goals and thinking. People were drawn to him. Hey, Buck. So his name became Buck Paulson. He took Claude Buck's name. He asked Claude, can I use your name as part of my artist name? So he became Buck Paulson. People came to him and said, Buck, we want to do a television show with you. Sam Battistone, millionaire.
But was it because his art was starting to get out there? How did people even know about him?
So he was doing workshops. So people were talking. A guy named Gary Jenkins, who had a show on television, he told Alexander Art about my dad. Hey, he's great. He's a wonderful artist. He's a great teacher. So Alexander Art contacts my dad and they start doing things on television. Then it spreads from there.
Real quick, is there anywhere that you would point people to like get your book or to learn about you, Tim?
Yes, totalityx.com.
Perfect. totalityx.com. I love the merging of theology and art. And for me, I'm very intrigued by psychology. I just love the concept. Go straight to the master. And I also like the idea that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Obviously, your father was becoming increasingly ready. And I think Kitty West could see that. And so, pathways became available. And just when it comes to pathways thinking, there's a great quote real quick from Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is a billionaire, and he asks himself this question regularly: how can I achieve my 10-year plan in the next 6 months? And that forces you to say, well, there's a 10-year plan and there's a 6-month plan. It's going to require a fundamentally different path or process if you're going to go the 6-month route. It's going to require a lot more learning, maybe a lot of growing pains, but there is new and better pathways. And one of the things that Angela Duckworth talks about in Grit is the idea that maturity involves two things. One is deciding what you're going to commit to long-term, and then having the maturity to let go of pathways that are not effectively getting you there along the way and finding new and better pathways to getting to what you're ultimately committing to. So you commit to what you want, and then you get better at uncommitting to the pathways that are non-effective. And I think your father did that. He uncommitted to adult education, and he was continually finding new and better ways to get to his ultimate commitment.
Very well said, my friend.
Any last words from you?
Keep up the great work. Everything you do is spectacular. I'm a big fan, so keep it up.
Awesome. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Talk to you later.